Hey, Mike with No Problems Gaming here. In today's video, we're doing a review and how to play video on Avatar: The Last Airbender, Fire Nation Rising, so let's get into it. Alright, so now that we got the game out, let's jump into a bit more on how to play, and then I'll jump into my review after that. So Fire Nation Rising is a cooperative card game and dice game for 1 to 5 players, and you'll take on the role of different heroes from the Avatar series as they attempt to fight back against the Fire Nation and restore balance to the world. In the first part of the game, you'll focus on recruiting heroes from the 4 different nations to fight off the Fire Nation, and this leads up to the Day of the Black Sun. And so once this happens, the final battles become playable, and you'll need to win the different battles if you hope to defeat the Fire Nation and end the 100-Year War. And so again, the object of the game is to defeat the Fire Nation and win all 3 battles at the end of the game. But if at any time during that attempt, 10 heroes die or 1 team is completely defeated, the heroes will lose. And there's some different ways to make the game easier or harder, which is nice because the general difficulty of the game is pretty hard. So when it comes to setting up the game, the first thing you'll want to do is choose which heroes you want to play as. So in this case, we've got Aang and Katara. So you'll want to find those heroes' character cards in the character deck and set them aside. So now that you've taken out your base characters that you're going to play as, you want to set up the rest of the character deck. And so how you do that is you'll take the villain cards from the Fire Nation, and depending on how difficult you want the game to be, you can leave all the cards in or take out some. It's recommended for beginning players to take out 3 of the villains randomly and play the game that way. So again, you can shuffle these up, remove 3 of them for a basic game, and then you can return those to the box, and then you'll take these villain cards and mix them in with the rest of the character cards, forming the base character deck. After you've done that, you're going to lay out character cards all around the board, 3 for each location. You can then set the rest of the character deck off to the side, and you'll draw from this throughout the game. You'll also want to set up the balance track and the ruin track off to the side of the game. And again, depending on how difficult you want the game to be, you can choose a beginner balance track that has one of these fire symbols, or you can choose one from 1, 2, or 3. The higher number of the fire symbols equal the difficulty the game will be. You'll then want to set out the different balance tracker token as well as the ruin tracker token, and those will move up throughout the game. You also want to set out all the Pai Sho tokens off to the side of the game face down, as each time you damage a villain, you'll be able to draw one for your characters, which unlocks special abilities for a one-time use. There's other ways to acquire them as well, but I won't get into that now. You'll also want to give each one of your players the different dice that their starting characters begin with. The first player is the person that has most recently seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, or you can randomly choose who starts the game as well. At this point, you're ready to start playing the game. And so how your turn works is through a series of steps each round. Alright, so going in the order of the turn, the first step that I want to take is to place the team token. So as you can see here, I've got Katara's token, and I'm going to place it on this location, as I think I can do a good job recruiting heroes or damaging a villain. The next step you want to do is reveal and resolve the Fire Nation card. So there's a stack of Fire Nation cards that will indicate where the Fire Nation leader will attack, as well as activate the different Fire Nation villains around the world. So in this case, the Fire Nation leader will move 1 to the left, and the ruin track will move up 1 space. Now when the Fire Nation leader is facing a location, he will damage each of the heroes at that location, as well as activate any Fire Nation villains that are on that location. And so in this case, this Fire Nation villain would activate, and so you'd activate their ability, which is dice may not be assigned to other villains in this location for the rest of the turn. Also, if my team token happened to be at that location where the Fire Nation leader is now facing, all of my team members would also take 1 damage. But since I'm not at that location, that's not going to happen. So at this point, the next step in the turn is to roll and assign your hero dice. So again, I'll roll the die. I'll throw those out there. And so now I'm looking to recruit heroes or damage villains at that location. So in this case, I ended up rolling 1 water symbol, 2 airbending symbols, and 1 earthbending symbol. And so now looking at the cards that are available at that location, it looks like I actually have enough to recruit Gran Gran. So again, as we look at Gran Gran's card, she needs 1 water and 2 airbending symbols to recruit. And so all I need to do is place those symbols on the card to designate that I'm assigning them to Gran Gran, and then after this turn, I'll recruit her to my team. Now when it comes to assigning die, it's pretty simple. Each turn you'll start off by rolling all of your die, and then you can choose one or several of the die that you want to assign to try and damage an enemy, activate your abilities, or recruit another hero. So in this case, I assigned those 3 die, and I could still re-roll this final die to try and activate another ability. So in this case, I actually rolled a water symbol, so I could activate Katara's ability by setting a die there, and it allows me to remove 1 damage from a hero. And so I could remove a damage from any of my heroes, heroes on my partner's team, or even any of the heroes around the board. So in this case, I'll remove 1 damage from one of the heroes where the Fire Nation attacked this turn. Now I've resolved all of my die, so I'm going to recruit Gran Gran. And when this happens, I need to put her either to the left or to the right of Katara, my other available hero. This is important because some heroes will activate abilities based on the type of heroes that are adjacent to them, or they might have abilities that affect heroes that are adjacent to them. So this is definitely something to pay attention to. So again, when you place a hero, they need to go either to the left or the right of your existing team of heroes. They can't be placed in the middle of some heroes. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's also the balance track or the ruin track. You can also assign your die here. So potentially I could have assigned an airbending die to this location, moving the balance track up 1. Now this is important because at the end of the game, the first team to reach the top will activate some special things which could either really help your team or really hurt your team. And so if the heroes are the first ones to reach the top of the balance track before the Fire Nation reaches the top of the ruin track, you'll actually be able to remove every Fire Nation villain that has this moon symbol on it. However, if the Fire Nation reaches the top of the ruin track before your hero team reaches the top of the balance track, all of the heroes that have this moon symbol will immediately be discarded and count as being defeated. So there's definitely a big advantage to reaching the top of the balance track before the Fire Nation does. So there's definitely an advantage to reach the top of the balance track before the Fire Nation reaches the top of the ruin track. Now once you conclude your turn, you'll need to refill the location fully if you recruited any heroes or defeated any villains. So in this case, I just flip out 1 more hero card or potentially a villain card to fill that spot. Now another thing to note on your turn is that you can assign dice to villains, as I mentioned. And so if I would have properly assigned the die to this Fire Nation villain, not only would I place 1 damage marker on that villain, but I would also get to draw a Pai Sho token. So again, you'll have these tokens set off to the side that are easy to reach for everyone. You would randomly draw 1, and then you'd be able to activate this ability on any player's turn at any time you wish. So in this case, this would count as 1 earthbending symbol I could assign to any ability, hero, villain, or even the balance track. Again, play will move back and forth between players following this same process and turn order until either the heroes or the villains reach the top of the balance ruin track. Once that happens, you'll go through the different effects like I talked about of either removing all of the villains with the moon symbol or all of the heroes with the moon symbol, and you'll also place out the final battles around the board. So again, there's 3 different battles that you'll set out across the board at their different locations. And similar to villains, you'll need to assign die to deal damage to this specific battle. And so once these battles are defeated, you'll flip over the reward side and your team will get to activate this reward. Another note is that after your turn, you'll return your player token to your team and the other player will place theirs on the map. So again, as I mentioned, to win the game, you'll need to defeat all 3 battlegrounds. And in order to damage these battlegrounds, you need to roll the respective die listed on the battleground, but there also needs to be no other villains present at that location. So you'll either need to kill off those villains at that location, or somehow move them to another location, or simply go to a location where there isn't a villain if you hope to damage that battleground. And again, as I mentioned earlier as well, if players lose a total of 10 heroes, or any one team loses all of their heroes, the players would lose the game. But if you're able to defeat all 3 battlegrounds before losing enough heroes, or an entire team is defeated, you'll win the game. Now that's a general idea on how you play the game. Certainly consult the rulebook for some additional details and specifics on rules. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment and I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability. But now that you have a better idea on how the game works, let's jump into my review. Well again, now that you have a better idea on how the game works, how do I actually feel about it? Well, I'm already a huge fan of the Rising series. There's several games There's a Harry Potter version, a Batman version, Star Wars, SpongeBob, and much more. And I feel like this game fits incredibly well in the Avatar universe. And so in the Rising series, you have those different types of die. And again, that works incredibly well in this version, as each die really represents one of the different nations, being the Airbenders, the Waterbenders, Firebenders, or Earthbenders. You'll also be able to recruit different heroes from the different nations, all with their own advantages and unique dice type to both recruit them and to utilize abilities on those characters. There's several base characters that you can choose from to form your team, as well as a ton of different characters you'll recognize throughout the series, both on the hero side and the villain side. One thing that I really liked about the game is the new balance track and ruin track feature. It gives you another challenging element to the game to try and balance as you go through the game. So not only do you need to attack villains and recruit heroes, in this version of the Rising series, you also need to track that balance and ruin track to either give your team a massive advantage at the end of the game, or potentially leave yourself scrambling if the Fire Nation reaches the top of the ruin track before your team. One thing that I really like about this version of the game as well is how the enemy team activates their abilities. And so in previous Rising games, you would roll a die, and that would indicate how the villain team would behave. And in this case though, you have a deck of cards to draw from. And so when you draw, not only will it indicate whether the Fire Nation leader will attack straight on, left, or right, but it also indicates how far the ruin tracker will move. I will say though, this can be a bit sporadic, as in one game we played through, the ruin tracker jumped right up to the top right away, but in another game it took several turns to even move a single place. So that's definitely a bit unpredictable and could lead to some big swings as you play the game. Another element I really like about the game is the different options to make the game easier. Now I would definitely consider myself an avid gamer, and typically our group does pretty well in strategy games, but I found the Rising series in general to be pretty difficult overall. It's often very hard to win, and in many cases you'll get pretty far in the game but end up being defeated by the villains. Or in some cases you might even have a massive blowout where the villains defeat you early on. So I think having a lot of different options to make the game easier is a lot of fun and really makes the game more accessible to casual players and more hardcore players alike. There's even ways to make the game more difficult, so once you really get good at the game, you have those options as well to further increase the replay value by making the game more challenging. I think the game does have a high replay value to begin with as well, because each time you play the game is totally different. There's different options you can set the balance tracker to, easy, medium, and hard. There's other difficulty settings you can tweak. You can start with different starting characters. You can play as multiple starting characters on a team. You can play solo, cooperative, and every time the characters that come up around the board are going to be in a different combination, so your strategy will likely be different every single game that you play. Once you get the overall feel of the turns, it's pretty simple to play as well. So I think if you like games where you can steadily improve your team, if you like elements like deck building or dice building, rolling massive handfuls of die, and an ever-changing strategy each time you play the game, I definitely recommend Avatar: The Last Airbender, Fire Nation Rising. But let me know in the comments below, have you played this game yet? Have you played any of the other Rising games in the Rising series? Which one is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Are there any other great dice building games I should check out? I'm always looking for new great games to play, so let me know that as well. And if you'd like to pick up a copy of this game, there'll be a link in the description below where you can do so. And if you like videos like this on video games, board games, and everything nerdy, check out one of our other videos here. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.